Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's going to be my Gameweek 9 transfer plans. The Gameweek 8 is not over. We still have a Nottingham Forest versus Crystal Palace game still to go. So my rank is not final. I think I'm around 1.6 million in the world. It says 1.4 on my screen now, but I think pricing in some of the Crystal Palace and even, let's say, Wood or Nottingham Forest defense ownership, I'm sure I'm going to have a little bit of a rank drop anyways, and that's going to hurt my team a little bit more. This week actually went quite well for me, finally. We have our first big arrow or big green arrow in a while, and that was a decent rank rise from around 1.9 million. Guardiola saving the day, Son as well. So as I mentioned in my team selection video, I was looking to do Saka to Son. Ended up pulling the trigger close to the deadline as there was no news on Saka and there was no news on Son, and I was pretty confident that Son would start, whilst there was still some doubts around Saka. And I just thought that, as I said, going back to the fact that I had Palmer in my team for the next 4 fixtures, I was quite comfortable doing a yo-yo between Saka and Son for the next 4, including Game Week 8, and that's what I've done. So the plan is still probably in the distance to think about maybe going back to Saka, but we'll see what the news update is from Arteta, although I'm sure we won't get much news. The only update we can really get is the European fixtures that Arsenal will be facing off in this week. We will get some more information with the squad, with the availability of Saka there, I'm sure. Now, I'm going to have a look at my transfer plans a little bit later on the Fantasy Football Hub client. So we're going to have a look at the My Team Planner. So do stay tuned to that segment later on when I discuss my plans heading towards Game Week 12, where I do think that there's quite a big fixture swing. But actually, now looking at Haaland with 3 successive blanks in a row, also considering, what the plans are with Haaland on Game Week 10, I'll be discussing my moves there. So if you're interested in also getting your own sort of fantasy planner, suggested transfers, things like that, have a look at Fantasy Football Hub in the link in the description below. They have a 30% off offer up until the end of December. So do have a look at that if you want to join and use a tool that actually is very, very helpful for projecting ahead, planning ahead, and getting a better FPL rank. Anyways, let's jump into a quick review of the game week. Man City defense shocking again, but to be honest, we're at a point where not many teams are getting clean sheets. So do I feel utterly bad that I have Man City defense at this point? No, because I think Lewis's cost is fair, and I think Guardiola still is an extremely attacking player at times, right? Depending on the system. Very happy to have played both and not to have benched a Guardiola goal once again, and we did it this time round. I played Leif Davis actually over Gabriel. The result was exactly the same. I think I was a bit lucky because, of course, that Arsenal red card was very controversial, and I probably would have done much worse. In my bench, sitting pretty, is Rodgers and Dunk, who both got 6 points. So yeah, in theory, of course, I guess I could have played Dunk and Rodgers. Would I've ever considered doing anything except for Davis for Gabriel? No. The only move I would have ever made that would have been different with this team is Davis and Gabriel. I was planning to play Dibbling this game. I was also definitely planning to play Rodgers next week as opposed to this week. I thought Dibbling versus Leicester made a lot of sense. He ended up getting a yellow card. So did Rodgers, but he scored a goal versus Fulham away, and Fulham have been a very, very strong team, particularly at home last 2 seasons, and I really didn't think that Rodgers would be on paper a better pick than Dibbling. Looking at some of these sort of projected market odds as well for goals and assists, I didn't see much to suggest that Rodgers would be a better pick than Dibbling, but fair play to anyone who got Rodgers. Some people got Rodgers through Saka, which is totally fine, and Son, very, very bogus assist. I really don't understand how the rules operate here. I think maybe it's the case that after the Crystal Palace game, the assist could go away. But I think there's also been sort of communications from FPL and the Premier League at times confirming the Son assist. So I really don't know what the situation is with that. I'm obviously sitting in a position where I own Son, and I'm very lucky to own the assist. So I'll take it. But I can understand why people are upset about it. And that is an unfortunate issue with FPL at times, where we don't have, I guess, full clarity at times on how situations are seen and why exactly things are the way they are, but we will move on there. Palmer not delivering this week, which is fine. I think I expected this to be actually the worst fixture, including the Arsenal game, because at least the Arsenal game is going to be a game where Palmer can play at home, and Liverpool away is probably one of the toughest tests for any team, particularly this much more strengthened Liverpool defense. Calvert-Lewin, Solanke, extremely, extremely depressing. So was Haaland, to be honest. If we evaluate the performance, Calvert-Lewin had better chances on paper, and it's a dire front line, but they still somehow will appear next week with really good fixtures, and I'm not too concerned with having to move them out. With Haaland, I'll talk about him in Game Week 10. Solanke, yes. I mean, the shouts that he's sort of playing like a DM are there, But I still think as a center forward, he's going to get chances over good games, and I'm not that worried in the short term. With Calvert-Lewin, he clearly, as I've said a couple of times, is the worst finisher in the league. Did I think over the course of these games that he'd still score some goals? Yes. And am I still going to give him the chance to do that over the next two, when the next two games are actually really good, like Fulham at home, Southampton away? I probably will. And then I'll reassess down the line if I want to move into some of the other budget forwards, because arguably every other budget forward scored this week except for the lap. We had Raul Jimenez score, we had Strand Larson score. I don't know if Wood will score. He might. He probably will. And so yeah, there's a sea of forwards to look at in a few game weeks time, and even in that Solanke position, arguably that could be Acuna if I keep Haaland. But definitely a lot of forwards on my mind, and there's a lot of options to move into. But do I still think it's the right time to move into them? Not necessarily. In defense, Flecken continues to be pretty tragic, but this was a week where not many goalkeepers did much outside of, let's say, Verbruggen. So I didn't own Verbruggen, went for Flecken in the end as part of my wild card, and he's got better fixtures to come, particularly in the next match. Leif Davis, a little bit sad to not see like too much sort of attacking production from him within this specific game versus Everton, but I was comfortable with the decision to actually play him over Gabriel simply from an ownership perspective. I thought this was a chance to have a player with similar clean sheet odds, similar sort of projected goals and assists for the game, and to take a little bit of a free risk here with Davis being 1.7% owned versus Gabriel, who was over, I think, 50% owned. So that felt like a chance to get some free risk. Didn't work out, but hopefully, or unfortunately as well, I didn't suffer too much from that. So that's basically the state of the game week. Let's quickly have a look at how my team is going to look like for the next few game weeks ahead as I plan my transfers. So I'm back here with the Fantasy Football Hub, my pick and rating tool. So I've already looked into some of the suggested transfers, things like that. I've also looked ahead in terms of my own plans. This is a very, very strong game week for me in Game Week 9. I'm very comfortable with the team I have. I am going to play Dunk over Gabriel. I do rate the Liverpool offense and their ability to score, particularly with the Saliba-less Arsenal. So I will be putting Gabriel on the bench, maybe for the worst of the team as per the sort of projected points model, but I'll take my chances here. And moving on to Game Week 10, because I would have rolled a free transfer here. This is the first window where we can revisit this idea of potentially just going into Salah, and it does depend on a few things. So if I go out of Haaland and if I go out of Dibbling, then there is a move possible where I can just go into Salah as per his price now, and I actually have a lot more money in the bank to go for another forward. And I think this is a situation where, because this fixture is actually really good for Liverpool from the offensive point of view, I'm not too fussed about not having Liverpool defense around now. I clearly have a weaker team, but I would be playing Dunk out of the team. And for Haaland, there's a lot of options within the forward position that I can go for. So Isak is out of my price point, but I could be looking at someone like Acuna, starting off here with a great fixture. And he's probably my preferred option. Someone who's on penalties for Wolves, someone who's had really, really good expected goal involvement this season, someone who has really good minutes as well. Does he cost a little bit more than some of the other forwards in the game? Yes, he does. But I still have 1.1 million in the bank here to upgrade some of my other players within the squad. And I think that is the sort of flexibility that I like. So if I make these transfers and if I optimize my team, clearly I play Davis versus Leicester at home. I've got Rodgers on the bench here, but it's still a very, very strong team. I'm going to give Calvert-Lewin this Southampton game. Unlikely that I think Rodgers will be playing for me for Tottenham away and Liverpool away, but that's basically how the team looks. I think I can also just play Lewis as well, depending on how his minutes progress, but having Leif Davis here as another option is very, very strong. So this is something that I'm planning within the distant future, where I think my team could move into this sort of position where I continue to own Son and Palmer up until game week 10 and 11. And then on game week 11, because I made that Son move, I actually am planning for a Son captaincy here. So even though I guess the model still sees Salah as a better pick versus Aston Villa at home, I'd like to take my chances with Son definitely versus Ipswich at home. They've been a really, really poor team so far in defense. I'd love to capitalize on that. And so if I optimize my team again, but then move the captaincy onto Son, this is probably what the team would look like. In this case here, there could even be situations where I make a free transfer on 11, but I think I highly doubt that. Game week 12 is where I can just make that move back into Saka, where I have some money in the bank. Saka potentially would have dropped a little bit in price as well, and I can go into him with 0.8 million in the bank, and I think that could be a very, very strong move in the short term. The reason why I quite like these moves is because I always knew I was going to roll for game week 9, regardless of whether I went for that Saka to Son move, as long as, let's say, those players were playing within that position. Now that I have Son in my team, I'm definitely rolling for game week 9, and that allows me to make two very, very strong transfers between Haaland and Salah, and I do think that I could probably get away with doing that. Once again, though, if I go back to my team and evaluate, let's say game week 10, where I make those two free transfers from Haaland to Salah, I'd have to be looking at, how do Salah's minutes look in the Champions League? How do Salah's minutes look within the league? And ultimately, how City are playing? Because KDB would probably be back in the team. I'd imagine that is going to be a huge boost towards Haaland and how I see him performing over these games. And there's obviously a City versus Liverpool game as well that I need to factor in. So I do think that if I move to Salah, this is the kind of team structure I would move into. It's not ideal necessarily owning Solanke on 12. So if I do Son to Saka on 12, I might also think about, what are the moves that I can actually make to go out of someone like Solanke. Potentially what I could actually do is go out of Solanke and also sort of move back into Havertz at this point in time here in game week 12. So we're kind of shifting off our Tottenham assets after their 4 good fixtures from 8, 9, 10, 11, and then moving them off into some Arsenal players in game week 12. And I would be allowed to do this by going for Haaland. It does seem quite tight here right now, making this move for Havertz in game week 12 and Saka. And this is obviously me continuously using my free transfers, not rolling as much as I would. But if I was supposed to roll, as I said, I do think that there is a possibility that I can just move into Saka on game week 12 and then move off of Solanke as well on game week 12 and actually roll with Haaland in my team, but just go for some more downgraded players in different price points and price spots. So that's actually something I've also considered as well, not going into Salah, but that really just comes down to those Champions League minutes. And I don't want to overreact necessarily to Haaland's 3 blanks in a row. He started the season extremely hot. We've seen blanks for all the premiums so far. This is just the life of FPL and football. Not everyone can score every single game week. So another way that I can kind of reevaluate my team, if I sort of refresh the sort of pick line here, is if I start from game week 9 and I roll in game week 9, in game week 10, I could roll once again. I think this is a very, very strong team, especially after optimizing. On game week 11, I would probably roll once again. And then on game week 12, now I have a lot of free transfers to make, right? Because I would have rolled on 9, 10, 11. I'd have 4 free transfers in this situation. And there's a lot of moves to be made as long as I'm comfortable with Haaland and his availability. Potentially the only move that I would actually make if I was going to roll the whole time here, and this might be, once again, based on my reaction to around game week 10, am I comfortable that Salah's going to play good minutes? If I don't, and I decide to roll, then probably the only move that I'm actually going to make on game week 12 is moving into Saka from Son here. Maybe I keep Solanke because actually the fixtures for Spurs are just generally quite good, and I would be okay with keeping him over this run of games. At the same time, there's other forwards that could be quite lucrative to move into, and I could also, by way of this, upgrade my defense if I'd really like to. I don't really see any defenders that I really like outside of Trent, to be honest. Outside of the ones that I have, I've got Gabriel, Guardiola, and Lewis. I feel like this is a defense that I can play most game weeks at a time. Clearly, on game week 13, this is where the issue lies for my team. So if I, let's say, make a transfer and go out of Solanke and I go maybe, let's say, out of Wood, for example, or go into Wood, for example, who's just a generic, very, very good striker at a good price point that I'd be happy to keep, then maybe in game week 13, this is a situation where I don't have a strong team. I've got Haaland, I've got Guardiola, and I've got Lewis. I'd be able to actually look at my team and have 3 transfers here. And then I can probably ask myself, what the plans are after I've spent 2 free transfers in the previous week. And potentially the play here is to just simply play Dunk, who actually fills in really well. And then I would need one more defender. I could play Leif Davis potentially, but I think I'm comfortable just simply playing Guardiola in this case. And Dibbling is someone who's just going to continue to sit on the bench for most game weeks at a time. And I guess I'd be comfortable with playing a team structure like this. And I'd just have to see what moves I'd like to make with certain players. Like maybe I can move off of Calvert-Lewin as well, but I don't think there's too many transfers that I'd like to make in the distance. It could even be upgrading, for example, someone like Flecken in the distance to Raya later down the line with a little bit more money within my team. So that's something that I've been thinking about. If I just simply play a little bit more of a passive approach, don't make free transfers in the distance, I could also just simply roll until game week 12. And the only move that I'd make, as I said, is maybe moves around Son and Solanke on that Man City fixture. I could also just take the even more passive approach and actually just not even go out of Solanke as well. That could be an option. But I think that free transfers are still there to be used this season. Do I see that much value in holding a lot of free transfers unless I'm actually planning to move out of big guns? Probably not. And I think one of the big values of owning Haaland this season is you can always make really nice 2 free transfer moves to get out of Haaland. To get into Haaland is a bit different. It probably takes 3 to 4 transfers at a time, and it requires you moving off of at least 2 premium players in the midfield. It requires maybe moving out of a Saka or a Foden or a Palmer or a Son at times, and a Salah, and then actually moving into Haaland. And that can be a little bit tough to do sometimes, because I might want to actually keep a lot of these premium players. Because I've actually stretched my team so much in terms of a price perspective, I do own quite an expensive team, and I'm aware of that. I think that's sort of what the plan was, particularly to sort of optimize around captaincies. One thing that I, as I said, really like about Game Week 11 is that the Son captaincy makes it a lot easier to actually ignore going for Salah on Game Week 10 potentially, because as long as I have Son as a captain here, I'm comfortable actually that even though Salah probably has the best captaincy in Game Week 11, that Son arguably competes very, very well with Salah. And maybe I think, as I said, he could be better, despite what the sort of expected points say here based on the hub client. So that's my thoughts so far right now. Let me know what your thoughts are. Do you think I should make that 2 free transfer move out of Haaland on Game Week 10? Are you guys also looking to maybe roll until Game Week 12, where we could actually restructure the team a bit more? One thing that I've also thought about on Game Week 12 is, if I have 4 free transfers here and I land on this window, and I could actually still restructure my team to a point where I could push even Dibbling up. If I go out of Haaland, and I can make some really, really interesting moves where I ignore Salah on 10, but I actually keep Son in the team, and potentially what I could do instead is, instead of going out of Son, I can make a team that kind of looks very strong by going out of Haaland and then keeping Son within the team. And I would actually have a very, very strong midfield and a weak forward line, I would say, for now. So in terms of forwards that I'm interested in, I could very well go for maybe someone like, let's say, Cunha still for now, or even maybe a Watkins potentially around this point in time. But I could very well have a team that looks very, very strong on paper, and I probably would be able to keep someone like Solanke too in a structure where I just go Haaland-less and also Salah-less. And this could actually allow me to probably actually move into Trent as well if I really wanted to do so, particularly on Game Week 13 when I don't really like the fixture that City have, and I don't really want to play City defense, but maybe I'm more comfortable playing a Trent in an Anfield fixture, particularly when I don't own Haaland anyways, and I'm sort of betting against Man City. So that's something I've thought about too, like just simply going no Salah, no Haaland. Clearly there's a lot of money in the bank here, but Wood is someone that doesn't need to be there. Solanke was previously there. I'd have Son in the team. If I make these transfers, for example, and I still get Solanke out of the team, this is actually a pretty strong team on paper, right? Because I would just have 8 attackers. I would have a lot of benching dilemmas on most game weeks, but then I don't even have someone like Dibbling, so I'd feel a little bit more comfortable, with those benching dilemmas, because I just know that the state of my squad is very, very strong at any point in time. Like, for example, in this week here, I could simply just play Rodgers. And so that's something that I've thought about too. Maybe going just Nomium, very much like the Ben Curlin structure that we've talked about previously in episodes, and that's something that I'm thinking about on my mind. So let me know what your thoughts are. Are you guys planning on keeping Haaland for the rest of the season up until maybe a really, really poor fixture run? Are you planning to go on Salah on 10? Or are you planning to go Nomium on 12? So those are the kind of options that I've been thinking about. But I think the nice thing about FPL is when there are weeks where we can roll, we can look ahead and then revisit transfers that we've thought about previously in different lines of play. So whilst I'm not saying that I'm committing to any transfer lines, it's really worth and helpful to actually look at future lines so that I can just open myself up to the idea that if I want to be flexible on Game Week 10, I could go Salah, but I could also have the option, as I said here, of going in Game Week 12 into a Nomium. I could also just keep Haaland, and that's a very foreseeable option as well. But it comes down to maybe how we're watching Man City play, how they're progressing with KDB back, and whether he's back at all, because he has come back to training, but we know it is quite a fragile player within the last 2-3 years, and that could be a problem. So something to think about. Let me know what your thoughts are. Take care and goodbye.